welcome to week 4, episode 4 of WNBA Digest. I'm a little glowy and shiny. I just came back from a facial, so you all are very welcome. Now, week 4 of the WNBA just wrapped up this Sunday, June 15th, and it's Father's Day, and we actually do record on Sunday, so we are recording on Father's Day. And so to kick us off, I wanted to share some of my favorite WNBA dads moments. Now, who can forget A'ja Wilson and her dad sharing a hug and embrace after she won the championship?
Okay, go hug dad, go hug dad.
Or Paige Becker's dad earlier this year at her first game, getting a bit emotional talking about how this was always a dream of hers.
Just happy for her. She's living out her childhood dream right now. Surreal and just so thankful for this.
We also have Alicia Gray's dad congratulating her last year at WNBA All-Star when she won the 3-point and skills challenge. But my favorite WNBA dad is Courtney Williams' dad. Now, Courtney Williams' dad has been known for being courtside and being at games and just being a huge cheerleader for his daughter. Courtney Williams plays for the Minnesota Lynx, and they recently launched a podcast as well as he has a TikTok dedicated to being her dad and going to all her games. And even some people are saying that he's a zaddy.
They said your daddy fine, respectfully.
Respectfully, come on.
Where you
now.
think Courtney got it?
Come on. Oh, a little turnaround. Man, watch out, bro. What you doing?
And of course, the women in the WNBA, who aren't the baby daddies, but are the dads that stepped up. Who can forget Brittany Griner in a press conference making sure that we all know that her parental pronouns are pops and pops.
You're about to be a mom. How is that feeling? Pops. Oh, let me get it together.
Pops.
About to be a pops.
She actually recently brought her child to a press conference. And my favorite, Emma Cannon, letting us know that she's the pappy.
I don't have a baby daddy. I's the pappy. Me.
Now, it was a crazy week in the WNBA. We had a ton of upset. First off, on Wednesday, we had the LA Sparks back in Las Vegas, who upset them. And then, also on Wednesday, we had the Storm knock off the undefeated Minnesota Lynx, leaving the Liberty as the sole undefeated team in the league for 2 days, because the Indiana Fever would go on to beat the Liberty on Saturday, meaning every team in the league now has lost. And while the Storm came up pretty big and did beat the Minnesota Lynx, they would then lose on Saturday as well to the Golden State Valkyries. And all these games were pretty big deals because of the Commissioner's Cup. And while a loss here and there doesn't usually really matter, these games did weigh heavily because they were all Commissioner Cup games. So let's look at the Commissioner Cup standings. Now, we're gonna look at the West first. The Minnesota Lynx do currently still have the best record. However, there are still several games to be played. And if several teams have the same record at the end of the Commissioner Cup standings, this is where point differential and win and losses matter. Because the Minnesota Lynx might have the same record as the Storm, for example, but the Storm have beaten them, so the Storm might then take the West slot. Or you have the Golden State Valkyries, who have now beat the Storm, so even if the Storm trump the Minnesota Lynx, the Valkyries can potentially trump them based on how everything shakes out. So it's a bit chaotic over there. And then if you look over at the East, although the Liberty and the Fever have the same record, and the Liberty have the overall better record, the Fever are now in the lead for the East standings of the Commissioner Cup because they beat the Liberty. And there are still several games to be played. All of the Commissioner Cup games will be done on Tuesday. And this episode will drop ahead of them, so next week we'll be able to fully get into who the winners and loss are, and we'll have a final idea of who is going to be playing later on July 1st. But I'm really glad that this week was a bit chaotic because it's given us some parity. And who really wants to see a rematch of last year? I don't. I want 2 different teams in the Commissioner's Cup. So I'm rooting for it to be chaotic and to get even weirder the next few days. So let's take a look at the regular standings. Now, while the Minnesota Lynx and the New York Liberty both had a loss this week, the Minnesota Lynx are currently in front because they've won one more game. And as you can see at the bottom, we've also had some more movement as the Chicago Sky and the Connecticut Sun only had 2 wins last week, but they played each other this week, making the Chicago Sky have 3 wins and be above them. I also love that although there are huge gaps between the 1 seed and maybe the 13th seed, in the middle, there's a lot of movement, and based on, any given day, the seeding is changing. And I hope it kind of stays that way, and we get a scenario where closer to the playoffs, it's like do or die, and 1 game or 1 win can separate you from a 3 seed to a 6 seed. Player movement. This was a little bit of a busy week. We had players in and out, injured, EuroBasket, everything. We're gonna get into it. First off, let's talk about the Dallas Wings. Paige came back from concussion protocol, which is great because teammate Ty Harris is unfortunately out for the remainder of the season with a leg injury.
Miss me?
Yes, actually.
Yeah, I know. I know.
Now, last week we did talk about Lee Yeru on the Storm asking for a trade. She did ultimately get traded to the Dallas Wings this week. Now, while I did want Lee to end up on a different team in the West, I'm not surprised that the Storm sent her to Dallas because Dallas likely will not be in the playoffs, and I can't imagine the Storm sending her to a team that they'll have to see and compete against. Next up, we have Indiana. Both Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham came back this week, and so because of it, no surprise there, the Fever did waive Ari McDonald now that they're at their healthy player limit. On to the Aces. Our reigning MVP, Asia Wilson, is in concussion protocol. Additionally, the Aces waived Crystal Bradford and added Joyner Holmes. I also want to say a quick point about the Aces. There's been a lot of talk about their roster and while certain players are able to be waived and certain ones aren't. And this is just across the league that there are contracts that are protected and contracts that aren't. And there are players that can be waived without their contracts having to be paid out and players that cannot. So sometimes if a team can't move around a player or drop a player that maybe you feel like isn't doing as well as they have in the past, it's because of the contract, and there's no point in consistently tweeting wild players on a team when it's clear that they're going to stay on the team. Okay. On to the Phoenix Mercury. Alyssa Thomas came back earlier this week, and today, on Sunday, Kalia Copper makes her official return, and it's going to be her first game of the season, and I can't wait. Sorry, I'm just really excited. We haven't seen her since Unrivaled. She didn't even get to play in the finals in Unrivaled. I'm sad about it still. Last week, we talked about the Golden State Valkyries having a huge EuroBasket exodus with a bunch of players leaving, as well as them still having some injuries. See Tiffany Hayes. So no surprise, they added several players this week. They added Ariel Powers, Caitlin Chen, and Chloe Bibby. The Sparks signed Shea Petty to a hardship contract, which is a little worrisome because I'm curious if that means that Cameron Brink and Ray Burrell are going to be out longer than we expected with injuries. Okay, quick EuroBasket update. Last week, we mentioned that Niara Sabli was going over to play for her home team of Germany. Niara has decided to stay in the United States and continue working with the Liberty, which makes sense. She was out earlier this season with some injury, and I can imagine that flying and then having to play rigorously on a EuroBasket team in the middle of trying to ramp up and get healthier is not ideal. So she is no longer reporting to EuroBasket. Also, to any EuroBasket player's name that I said wrong last week, I'm sorry. Guys, El Sode, I will be better. And finally, last week we discussed Courtney Vandersloot, unfortunately, tearing her ACL. It wasn't official at the time of recording, but it is now. And I know what you're thinking. Well, with Courtney out, there's no reason to talk about the Vanderquigs anymore. But you're wrong, because Courtney's wife, Allie Quigley, announced her retirement this week. Now, Allie has not played since the 2022 season, and she never officially retired, so it makes sense that she finally made an announcement so that we all know it's legit. Allie Quigley leaves as a WNBA champion, a 4-time three-point contest champion. At this point, it should be named after her. A 3-time All-Star and 2-time Sixth Woman of the Year. She wrote a really beautiful post on the Tribune, and Chicago announced that they will be retiring her jersey on July 9th. I won't be at that game. I already have another event that day, but I can't wait to see all the footage. And you know we will be covering it, because any excuse to talk about the Vanderquigs, I will do it. And while this was like the end of the era for the Chicago Sky fans, we will always have that 2021 championship, and no one can take it away from us, okay? And I know a lot of you new fans aren't privy to the championship because you wasn't here then, and listen, you have no one to blame but yourself. And finally, my favorite segment, we're gonna do one sentence on every team in the WNBA because there's always something we miss. Washington Mystics, let's just try again next week. Seattle Storm, I mean, you win some, you lose some. Phoenix Mercury, AT and Kavak, time to see what this big three is really gonna be. New York Liberty, so you took an L, but honestly, how much contending can you do with 2 of your starters out? Minnesota Lynx, you wasn't gonna stay undefeated forever. Los Angeles Sparks, you know, a win is a win, a win is a win. Good job. Las Vegas Aces.
What if we lose? What if we lose again? What if the story ends?
Asia in concussion protocol, which everyone deserves a break, and maybe this is good for you all to figure out how to win games without her. Indiana Fever, Caitlin back. Golden State Valkyries.
You ain't my equal, we ain't people, I ain't wanna get.
Dallas Wings. Okay, Paige, a little concussion is all we needed to drop 30 plus. I see you. Connecticut Sun. I'm just here for the TikToks. Chicago Sky. A lot of men in women's business, but hey, at least you got a win. Atlanta Dream. Ryan is finding her rhythm. So many theatrics. And that caps off another week of WNBA Digest. Join us next week as we recap week 5. Happy Pride! And happy Juneteenth.